everyone, I'm Libby Bushell from ProWritingAid and welcome to the first session in our jam-packed Crime Writers Week Thursday schedule. I am super excited to be joined today by crime author Nadine Matheson, in part because I've been reading her amazing book and I can't wait to hear more about how it was written. Nadine is a criminal solicitor, or a lawyer for the Americans in the crowd, and the author of The Jigsaw Man, which was published in February this year to great acclaim. In 2016, she won the City University Crime Writing Competition and she completed the Crime and Thriller Novels Creative Writing MA at the City University of London in 2018. So hi Nadine, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No problem, we are so excited to have you.
Mm.
So we kind of had a little chat before we started the webinar today, and I kind of asked you whether it had sunk in yet that you are now a published author, and sort of we talked a little bit about how it's been publishing in this time, and I wondered if you'd like to just...
Yeah, it still hasn't sunk in yet. I was published in the UK on the 16th of February, so it's been out for 2 months now in the UK. It's been out for a month in the States, and it came out in Finland on Monday. But I remember thinking, I was saying earlier, I remember thinking back in beginning of lockdown, back last summer, thinking, oh, it'll be fine. My book will be published. We won't be in lockdown. I'll be able to go to the bookshops and sign books. And no, we went straight back into lockdown. So my book was published in the middle of lockdown, which has been a bit weird, but in a funny way, even though I haven't been able to make, be out in the bookshops, I've done so many of these online events and met so many new readers. So in that sense, there's been like a benefit to being in lockdown, but I don't think it's sunk in that I've got a book. No.
Like, who wrote this? Who's this?
Actually, I got them. I'll show you. Like, I've got the different covers, which is cool. So I've got this is like the UK cover, and then this is the US cover, and then the Finland one came out. Came out on Monday, and even when this arrived this morning, I was looking at it in my hand, thinking, "It's a real book." Like, of course, it's a real book. But
well, it's obvious from reading your bio there that we are going to have so much to talk about in the next hour, so I think we'll jump right in. Okay. I'm ProWritingAid's editorial assistant, so I sort of just finished my degree in English Lit last year, and I absolutely lived for just pulling apart writing and stories and figuring out what made them work and everything. But it's only kind of since I started my job here that I sort of thought, actually, maybe I could be a writer. Maybe I could do this. This is actually not just something that kind of you really, because I kind of thought it was something that only like great artists did. Yeah. I thought you had to be like a Stephen King or a Zadie Smith or someone just that's so sort of crazy talented that we sort of see as really but all the interviews that we've had this week have just really made me realize that actually kind of maybe it is possible, maybe I have got a story in me. So I guess I was kind of wondering, what point did you kind of think, okay, I can do this, I can be a writer? And what would you say to writers that are just starting out there?
I think firstly, the thing I'll say to writers just starting out is that everyone has a story in them. It is there, and it's just feeling brave enough to sit down, whether it's with a notepad or with your laptop, and to sit down and start writing your story. And I say the most important thing is not to think about what's on the top of the bestsellers lists or what book has just been made into the film. Just stay committed to the story, that little gem of an idea that's generated in your head. Just stay committed to that. But in sense of myself, in terms of when I decided I wanted to write, I remember the first book I wrote, I was 9, and it happened because I watched The Labyrinth with David Bowie. So it's probably fan fiction. I was like, I'm going to write a book version of The Labyrinth. And I took my dad's typewriter at the time. I took my dad's typewriter, and I remember, and it's probably in the loft, I started writing. Well, I suppose that it was fan fiction. That's what I started writing. And that's how a lot of writers coming up now, and they start off writing fan fiction also. So that's not a bad place to start with writing. But in terms of my career, obviously I'm a criminal lawyer, so even though I've loved books since I was a kid, I've always been surrounded by books, and I was always writing little stories. I also wanted to be a lawyer as well. But then there's a funny thing I mentioned to someone the other day, is that growing up, I didn't know that being a writer could actually be a job. If that makes sense, something that I could do. So I I would say in sense of like my background, having a career, like a professional career, that was what you would aspire to, which is why I probably did become a lawyer. But I said I was always writing stories, and got to university and there was endless half-written, probably really bad film scripts that I have out there that I started writing. So it was something I always did in the spare time I had. But it was only when I became self-employed as a solicitor, as a lawyer back in, I think, 2013, that I found I had time to write.
Yeah.
And also I did, I can never pronounce it properly, Nanowrimo or Nanowrimo. Yeah, I did that in 2014, I think it was. And I actually completed it, and I self-published my first book, which wasn't crime fiction. It was, I say, family drama. Mm-hmm. So doing Nanowrimo as well, setting yourself a challenge, that's also a good place to start. And when I'd finished that, I thought, oh, I've got a book. I can write. I can tell. Yeah, I can tell a story. And then I've also always wanted to write crime as well. So I always knew I was going to end up writing a crime novel, which is what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I know that a lot of our audience today are all kind of writers and aspiring writers, and they'll be really keen to sort of hear about that writing process. Yeah. So something that's really sort of struck me this week is just how intricate crime writing is. There is so much that goes into it, and so much people have to think about when they're writing crime. So do you kind of plan everything out before you start writing? Did that change when you were sort of writing sort of your other books you've written?
No, I'm a planner. I cannot pants it. I realized a long time ago that if I pantsed it, I would get to 20,000 words, and it was always around that 20,000 word mark, and I would just get stuck. I'd have no idea what my characters were doing, where they were going. They'll just be sitting in a kitchen for like for weeks because I had no idea what to do with them. So I learned very quickly on that I need to plan my story. So before I even start writing that first draft, I'll have an outline. So it's not a detailed chapter by chapter outline. I break it down into sections, and it's basically the same approach I took to when I did Nanowrimo, because you have 30 days to write a novel. So I basically broke it down into 30 sections, and in that each section I'd give a brief outline with its 3 sentences about what I want to happen in the story, and that's how I will plan out the first draft. But the thing I always call the outline, I don't stick to it rigidly, and I don't think you have to. I think because it sounds a bit pretentious, but it can kind of be like an organic thing, because you may find that subplots, which is what happened with book 2, a subplot I had no idea about just suddenly materialized out of nowhere, and I had to weave that in the story. So I call the outline like my safety net. So if I do get a bit stuck, I can go back to it and see what my original intention was. And that's the same approach I take, whether it's a short story or a full novel. I outline.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess that's something that has struck me as well. Is so many authors kind of say, oh, and then this thing had to happen in the book, and I had to find a way to get it to go in there. And I find that so interesting. Just kind of the book almost. I mean, you've done all the work and put all the work into it. The book hasn't told you how to write it, but it's kind of it's telling you things. So did you, when you sort of set out writing the Jigsaw Man, was that kind of, did you think I'm gonna write a crime novel, I'm gonna write for the crime genre, or did you kind of have these sort of really brilliant characters that I think the readers can just really connect with? Did you kind of have them in your head and they kind of had stories that they wanted you to share almost, and then crime was a good way of kind of...
It was kind of a combination of like, I'll say 3 things, because I've always wanted to write crime. I've written other things, I've written sci-fi before, but I've always wanted to write crime. So I had stories that I eventually basically started and not finished. But there was this one character, this detective Henley, who's in the Jigsaw Man, and the protagonist in the Jigsaw Man. She was always someone in the back of my head, like a voice, like she was literally speaking, like chatting. But I did a creative writing masters in 2016. So that was as a result of winning the competition. And to be fair, I didn't intend to go back to university and study, because I teach as well. So the last thing I wanted to do was be taught after I'd been teaching in a
absolutely.
law school. But I did a creative writing master's, and the thing about the master's was that it specialised in crime writing. So in order to complete the master's program, I had to write a novel, and that novel became The Jigsaw Man. But I said Henley was always talking in the back of my head, and then I knew I wanted to write a police procedural. Even though I'm a lawyer, I knew I didn't want to write about a lawyer. I wanted to write a police procedural. And then I had this idea, because I live near the river. I'm in London, so I live near the River Thames, and I grew up by the Thames. And there was always stories about bodies being found in the river. I'm probably like, it's just urban myths. And then in my day job, I think a couple of years after I qualified, there was a case where a man's leg was found on the motorway. And that case, it wasn't my case, but it always stuck in my brain. There's a combination of all those elements that came together. It was like a perfect storm. So I was doing the course, I had Henley in my head, and I had this old case that I always remember, because the unique thing about it was like every month a different body part would appear in a different part of London or the surrounding areas. So I combined all those three elements together, and that's what led to The Jigsaw Man, to the novel.
Do you think you kind of use, do you find you kind of use a different part of your brain when you're approaching like a real case to when you're kind of writing, or do you think how do those sort of two things work together, your kind of job and your writing career, and how do they feed into each other?
I think because I specialize in crime, that's all I've done for 16 years. All I've done is work in crime. I'm automatically able to compartmentalize my brain. So I've never took my work home with me, because working in crime, you can have really basic minor crimes, like someone stolen a joint of lamb from the supermarket, to really horrible things which I've worked on. So I've worked on the murder cases and the rape cases, so I've done all those. So you can't take it home with you, so I'm able to compartmentalize and not think about it. And I think I carry that same approach that I do with work. I carried it into writing, because with The Jigsaw Man, it is a police procedural. The character is in pursuit of two serial killers, and basically there's dismembered body parts all over the place. And some of the scenes I wrote, I didn't initially think they were gruesome at all. I thought they were quite tame. It's only when my editor came back to me and my agent, and the readers have been coming back and said, they've been saying, it's been keeping me up at night, it's gruesome, I'm going to give someone a trigger warning. And I'm thinking, I don't think it's bad at all. But I think it's because I compartmentalize it and I don't take it on. So I do use that. So that's where law and writing kind of works together. But also just writing itself, because part of my my day job is not just standing up in court and talking on behalf of my clients. It's also, there's so much writing, especially when you're training. So I'm writing out court applications, I'm writing briefs, I'm writing out my my client statements. And when you're writing out a statement, you are in effect telling a story from your client's version of events. And also when I'm giving a jury speech, and I write my speeches out. And again, it's like a safety net. I may not stick to it, but I do write it out. But again, I'm telling the jury a story. So all of those elements of being a lawyer, those have definitely influenced me writing.
That's such a good point, because so like at ProWritingAid, we kind of do always say that so much of writing, so much just writing, when you write, you will find that you are telling a story, and when you talk to people, you're telling a story. And kind of actually, for people that do want to write, you probably have more experience telling stories than you think you do. No,
I think that's absolutely right, because you can go into, now that we can go outside, you can go outside the pub with your friends, and you're telling them about your day, or you're telling them about something that happened to someone else, or you're telling a joke. It's all a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and the end. So even if you don't think you're a natural storyteller, you do have the ability, if you look back on things you've done in your life and conversations you've had, even if you've given a presentation at work on the most boring subject in the world, you're still in effect telling a story.
Yeah, definitely. Just sort of hearing you talk about your career there, I was just kind of wondering, is there anything either sort of before you started writing that kind of made you want to write, where you would read in crime fiction and you just think, that's so wrong, that's just not right, that's so annoying? Like, was there anything that writers kind of did that you just think, oh.
No, it's weird. It doesn't happen with books. It happens with TV, because if I'm a lawyer, so if I'm watching shows that are set on the British legal system, that's when I sit back and go, well, you've got that wrong. You've got that wrong. We would never do that in court. Why are you wearing a wig? You don't wear a wig in the magistrate. All these little things. But when I'm reading the books, I don't know. I'm able to detach myself away from it. And I suppose there haven't been that many legal thrillers in the last 10, 15 years. Not like when I was growing up. There seemed to be like a legal thriller every week, but recently there hasn't been to be. So if I'm reading a police procedural, because I only do defense, I'm reading it from a different point of view. So I'm less inclined to say, well, that's wrong. You wouldn't do that. But I'm not put off by gruesome things either. I'm like, oh, that's good.
I mean, I definitely had like a couple of like heart racing moments reading the Jigsaw Man, like just and just kind of moments where I was like, no, don't, oh no, oh no, oh no.
Yeah.
I mean, one bit that, I mean, the bit that really grabbed me right away was actually the way that you wrote the beginning of the book. And I'm aware that not everybody that's watching today will have read the book, so we're not going to spoil anything, or you don't need to rely on that at all. But kind of the perspective, you kind of use a third person perspective, and it zooms in and out on these different locations, and you almost get a little bit of whiplash, because you're kind of like, oh god, there's a body part over here, there's a body part over there. This person's found one, this person's found one. What kind of role did you want that? Because that felt really purposeful. I mean, obviously the whole book's purposeful, but that felt really purposeful to me. And sort of what role did you want that introduction to the crime and the way you placed the crime, literally first sentence, first page, sort of to play in sort of setting up your characters and your plot, and kind of just sort of feeding onto that? How do you kind of recommend approaching writing the opening to a story? I know it's a thing that people struggle with sometimes.
I mean, the prologue, which is the bit where you're talking about, I mean, it's not a spoiler. You've got witnesses finding body parts, they're all in the same area. And my intention when I wrote it, I mean, there's two things. The first was that I wanted it to feel as if all these witnesses were finding these body parts at exactly the same time. So that's the sort of feel I wanted the audience to have, and kind of also having like a bird's eye view over what's happening. So that was the first intention. And the second part of it was that the prologue actually came out of an assignment that I was doing on the Creative Writing Masters. And that assignment was just to write 1,000 words on suspense. So I'd written this opening, we'll say these 1,000 words, and that turned out to be the prologue of the Jigsaw Man. So it was always my intention, it has to be suspenseful. It has to immediately capture the reader's attention, because whenever you're writing, you want to give the reader a reason to say what happens next and to have them turning over the next page. And I thought, well, the best way to do it is to have people finding something. Not very nice. And if you've got more than one person finding these horrible things, just when they're out doing their normal day. So also I want it to feel as though it could be you. You know, it could be you just going to work, or it could be you just taking a walk along the riverside and you find something. So that was my intention when I wrote it. So I think for anyone who's writing their first book, when they're thinking about the start, just think about, how can I grab the reader's attention to keep them invested?
Yeah, because I think as soon as you are sort of thrown around a few different places, you then immediately think, oh, how do those connect? Why have they all been put sort of together? And it makes the reader kind of ask those why questions that are just so compelling in this kind of writing.
I mean, that's why I plan. If I didn't have an outline, I would have just had those witnesses still sitting on the riverbank for like 20,000 pages. I don't know what I was doing with them. But you need to know, I always say this, because I mentor some writers as well, and I always say to them, let's be context to things. So if you have got people finding something, or there's a conversation taking place, or even if there's a car, there's a BMW going down the street, then there needs to be a point where you don't just put stuff in there just to fill up space on the page. So you have to think about the context also.
I think something else I kind of noticed with that perspective, which made me think about sort of your planning process and stuff, was because you've got that kind of third person perspective, and you sort of, we get to see into quite a few different characters' point of views at different times, and it means that sometimes the reader knows something that the detective doesn't, or that the kind of, well, the couple of villains don't know. How did you kind of keep that all sort of straight in your head and sort of know who knew what at what point and what that meant for?
Good. I mean, the key. I'm not an expert, but I say the key to writing, I say a good crime novel is having the structure in place. So I think for each character, I knew why they were there. I knew what the point of them being in that scene was. But also, just on a personal level, I don't like writing. I can write in the first person, but I don't like spending all that time in one person's head. Like I get. So if I'd done it in the point, if I'd written the Jigsaw Man in the point of view of Henley, I know I would get frustrated just being in that one point of view, because I think by nature I want to know what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be a bit nosy like that. When so I want to know what everyone else is thinking. So which is why I write in the third person. But I think the key thing for me, I mean, it just goes on to writing characters, is that you don't want them to come across as being flat. You want them to come across as being real people. So when you're creating your characters, think about, I'll sometimes do like a little mini biography of them, and it could just simply be what their favorite food is, what football team they support. I mean, I know what football team 3 of my characters support, actually 4 of them. I know what their favorite foods are, and I know how they feel about things. But then sometimes you don't necessarily know everything about your character until you start doing the rewrite. So when I do the first draft, it's just my main priority is just to get the story down in some shape or form. So even if I said a subplot materializes out of nowhere, and I'm like, oh crap, what am I going to do with this? But at least I know when it comes to the rewrites, that's when I can fix it and weave it in properly. But that's also when I can develop more of my character. And also, you don't even see your character until they start interacting with other people. That's when different elements of their personalities come through.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely want to get onto your editing process in a minute, but because I guess I don't read a lot of crime, and something that kind of really struck me is that, you know, Henley and Ramuta, they've got some pretty big stuff going on in their lives, like around. So aside from the kind of brutal murder sort of plot that you've got, you've kind of got those backstories and those subplots that really, like, for me, they really opened up the characters, and kind of how sort of was that kind of a intentional sort of move to say, I want people to know some more about why my characters are reacting to this kind of central plot in this way?
Definitely. And I think for me, because obviously my main character, Henley's black, and Ramuta, her partner, who's a trainee, and I feel sorry for him because I kind of put him through it just a bit. But he's Asian, so you've already got this, like, 2 characters you don't see a lot of in crime fiction, especially leading a story as the main protagonist. But in terms of their backstory, in my day life, when I'm going to police stations and I'm representing clients and I'm meeting detectives, you know, some of them, you know, you get on with, and I've known them, few of them for years. And also one of my best friends, who I've known since secondary school, is a police officer. And you know, from work and interacting to them, there's more to them to just the job. And if they do respond, like I had this client, without going into detail, I had this youth client who's continuously getting into trouble. And the officer dealing with him, he'd had a previous case where the kid he was kind of trying to steer the right way, he ended up getting killed. So I could see the motivation why he was so invested in my client, even though my client's been an absolute pain in the neck, but there was a reason why he was so invested. So taking all of those experiences, you know that your detectives, they have lives, they have personal lives, and there's reasons why they will respond to a situation one way, and you may think, well, that's completely irrational the way you're responding to it. So it's important for me that when I wrote the book, that I said my characters don't come across as just being a cliched detective, you know, with an alcohol problem. They do have lives, they do go home to something, whether that home life is perfect or not. They go home, and if the home life isn't perfect, then that might be a reason why they're motivated to pursue a case the way that they are.
so kind of on editing, we asked people in our Facebook group whether they enjoy editing or not, and it was either I absolutely love it, it helps me to kind of really polish my story and get to know my characters and kind of, or it was no, I hate it, I never want to do it, I don't want to read my story again, I just want it to be done, I want it to be so kind of where do you kind of stand on that? Do you enjoy editing?
In the very beginning, when I get my editing notes back, I don't look at my editing notes for a week because I'm like, I don't want to look at them. And then I look at them and I'm like, right, I know you're right, but I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But then once I get into it, because I think I like fixing things. So like I'm putting things, literally like putting things together like a jigsaw puzzle. So actually once I'm in it, once I've started, I don't mind it. I enjoy the editing process. The thing is, like I'm editing book 2 at the moment, but I'm starting from the beginning. So what's irritating me right now in editing is timelines. So I'm just trying, because there's so much going on, it's just getting that timeline of events right. And that's what editing is. It can be, as I said, sorting out a character's voice, it could be sorting out you know, a subplot which came out of nowhere, which I had to fix because I needed to resolve it. But it can also just be, you know, making sure your timeline's correct, because readers pick up on things. Now pick up on little things. And if you said a character died 6 months ago, but actually you've got them 4 months ago walking down the high street, they'll notice.
Like, this isn't the kind of novel I thought it was. There's some super stuff going on. do you kind of find you edit at all as you write, or is it kind of a I'm writing and then I'm editing kind of situation?
No, I finished. If I edited while I was going along, I would never finish.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's one writer, I don't know who it is, who says he does a chapter, then he goes back and edits, and then he moves on. I can't do that. I literally said I get the first draft done, so no matter what shape or form it's in, and I'm quite content knowing that in the first draft that character's name probably changed. They changed sex and like their location's different, or I said there's a subplot that comes out which you wasn't expecting, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that, because my main aim when I'm writing the first draft is I just want to get the story down in some shape or form. And then once I've done that, and I've got something to work with, and that's when I get into the second draft. That's when I start. I said I'm fixing things. I'm making sure the character's name, if it's Stella, it's going to stay Stella. And if the subplot is materialized, then I've resolved it in the second draft. So yeah, I don't touch it. I don't touch it whilst I'm going along with it.
No, because yeah, I mean, they always say there's nothing scarier than the blank page, and like if you've got all of that there, and you've got all those different pieces to work with or put together like a jigsaw, then you've kind of got something to you kind of know where you need to start with you.
Exactly. And the thing is, and once I think Stephen King says it's like when you've written your first draft, like leave it alone. And I think when I wrote the first draft of book 2, Jigsaw Man was slightly different because I was doing it as part of a course. So I think I had probably like a month off before I started working again on the second draft. But with book 2, I think I took about 2 months away from it. And it's when you go back to it, because you're not so attached to it, you've kind of released all the stress and drama that it took to finish it. And then when you come back to it, whether it's 6 weeks later or 2 months later, you're a bit fresher and you're a bit more open to changes that you have to make. Because I think one of the things about writing, sometimes we can spend hours writing a paragraph and we think it's a perfect paragraph, and then you've got to edit and you're like, I don't want to change, but really the paragraph doesn't need to be there. And even with the Jigsaw Man, the first draft I had it's not a spoiler, I had a character called DC Clark in the first draft, and he was there in the first draft and the second draft, and in I think the third or fourth, when I was editing with my editor, she's like, you need to lose him. So this character I spent like over a year with, and he was there from the first page.
Yeah,
I had to lose also. So that's also being part of it's getting used to making those cuts and accepting them.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of incredible, because when you read a book, you almost don't imagine the people that aren't there, and you've got him walking around in your head. Like he's kind of.
Oh, I brought him back for book 2. I'm like,
I was going to ask you if you brought him back yet.
Yeah, because he was one of the first after Henley and after Remuta, and then Olivier, who's a serial killer in the Jigsaw Man. DC Clark, he was like a prominent part of the book, so he was always with me, and I could see him, like I could imagine what he looked like. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm not kidding him. So I just took him out. But I thought, no, I will bring you back. I'm going to give you a little cameo. So he's got a cameo in book 2.
There you go. That's for you.
Yeah, right, this is for you. I'm giving you a little bit of life.
Yeah, we kind of had a really fun panel discussion yesterday. And one of my favorite parts was kind of hearing about sort of what the authors do with those sort of paragraphs where you're like, I love this, but I can't keep it, kind of thing. But then also what they do when they do get stuck, or when they come up against sort of those little hurdles, like I'm gonna have to get rid of this, but that means that I'm gonna have to rewrite that section, or kind of I mean, it did make me laugh because Lisa Gardner said that she goes hiking, she does active meditation, and then Ian Rankin came in and said, yeah, just go down the pub and have a pint, and I just try and figure it out. So and I was like, okay, different approaches, let's go. But I would do Ian Rankin's approach.
I'll probably head downstairs, get a glass of vodka and tonic, and go and sit in the kitchen, sit in the garden. If I got stuck. But no, sometimes I mean, even with this draft and Jigsaw Man, I mean, there's been loads of things I've cut out and thought, oh, I'll keep it for later. And it's on, I'm looking at my computer now, and it's a little folder up there, and I'll put it in there. But I never go back. Like I've never used it. And I think you just have to, you kind of have to get out of your own way when it comes to getting rid of characters or getting rid of storylines, because you're so attached to it and you spend so much time creating it. But you have to force yourself to step back and ask yourself, does it really work? Is it going to take the story anywhere? Is it just a little vanity project for me? And if you're able to do that, then you're able to just move it. But I think, I mean, there's been a couple of scenes that they didn't make the Jigsaw Man, but like the basis, the foundation of them I kept, and I used them in book 2. Whether it's a character's background or there's an actual scene that I've used, or DC Clark, the character.
So I mean, the kind of premise when you just read it in the book description, kind of there's both a detective and a killer looking for the kind of villain in your
copycat,
copycat killer. How important do you think it is to kind of put your own, because I mean I I've not read massively widely in the genre, but I do think that is really quite unique. I wasn't expecting that. I kind of thought, oh, it's gonna be him, but so how important do you think it is to kind of put your own spin or sort of stamp on the genre? And did you kind of think about that as you were writing, as something that maybe helped you kind of get excited about the writing, or is it kind of something you might do if you are thinking about getting published, like having that thing where you're like, oh, I know that I'll be able to describe my book and say this is what makes it a little bit different?
I mean, when I originally started writing the book, it was never supposed to be 2 serial killers out there and Henley chasing these killers and one of the serial killers basically chasing another serial killer. It wasn't supposed to be that. And when the character Olivier is like the main killer in there, he's it's not a spoiler, but he's a serial killer. He was just supposed to be a device just to get the story moving. He was never meant, in my first draft, he was never a major part. He was never major part of the story. It's only when I started getting feedback, especially then from my agent and my editor, and also friends who had read it, who I did the writing course with, everyone really liked him and they wanted more of him. And I thought, well, you're not supposed to like him because he's a horrible serial killer. He's in prison. He's not a good, but everyone liked him. So I said it comes down to the rewrites. The story then ended up changing a bit. But I mean, I read somewhere, I even had the book, it said there's only 7 original ideas out in the world. So every story you read, whether it's a police procedural or psychological thriller, even a sci-fi, it's going to be a derivative of one of those 7 stories. And if you're writing a police procedural, it's either going to be, it's always going to be an investigation. So someone's going to be chasing somebody. There's not much you can do with that. But I think the uniqueness of your stories, the uniqueness could be a result of the characters' stories, that in their own personal stories that you're telling. Because I think sometimes we can be trying really hard to think in advance of the twist, you know, what makes this special, but you don't necessarily know until you've actually finished the first draft. So I didn't know that I was going to have a copycat and a serial killer in the same story, and the serial killer is going to be wanting to catch the copycat just as badly as Henley was wanting to catch him. So that came afterwards. I mean, my original plot outline, it's nothing.
Yeah.
This whole convoluted nonsense about postcodes and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose for people listening, it's kind of, if you're stuck right now in the middle of something, thinking, oh God, I don't know how I'm gonna write my way out of this, it probably isn't what you'll end up with, and that's actually really very okay.
It's more than okay. And what I also had to remind myself when I did get, because I did get stuck, or I'd find that I'd write myself into a corner, and because of my legal background, when it came to things of the legal side, I was so conscious of I didn't want to get it wrong. Even though I've been doing it for over 16 years, I didn't want to get it wrong. But then if I wrote myself into a corner, I literally had to write a post-it note and stick it on my wall saying, you can make things up because you're writing fiction. So as long as you can make it seem authentic and there's a reason for it, you are allowed to make things up if you get stuck, so you can get out from the corner, the one-way street that you rolled into.
I've just spotted a question in the chat, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but somebody's asked, what are the 7 stories?
I remember them. There's a book. I will come into the Facebook group, and I will put a comment up, because I had a book which I gave to someone and didn't get back. It said there are only 7 original stories. But I will come into the group and post it.
Great, thank you. So sort of speaking about getting published, I would love to know more about your sort of journey with publishing. And you said that this wasn't the first book that you'd written, and this wasn't the first genre that you'd written in, but was there something about it that kind of made you think, I think when I start, had you tried to publish another book before, or was this the first one that you'd actually?
Yeah, there was one book. I think you'll find most published writers will tell you that this isn't their first book that they've written. And the very first book I wrote I was in my mid-20s, and I wrote this book, and looking back on it now, I had no business sending it out to anybody. Because one, it wasn't ready. 2, I thought it wasn't even, it was a good story, but it wasn't ready to go. And I think that for new writers out there, once you've finished the book, it's such a big achievement in itself to finish a book, finish anything, that you just want to get it out, then you just want to submit it to agents. But the most important thing I say is just to wait, like make sure it's ready to go. And if you have got an agent who's expressed interest, they will wait for you to say, you know, I need to do another draft of it before I send it to you.
Yeah. Because I mean, I read somewhere that somebody, an agent, that I don't know whether you queried them but they said it wasn't exciting enough.
Oh yeah,
my heart was going yesterday reading it, so I didn't know what they meant, but like
yeah, it was. I have this really bad habit of I jump into things without thinking about it, and then afterwards I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But I'd written I was nearly written the first draft of the Jigsaw Man. I said I was doing it as part of the course, and as part of the course, we did like a open mic sort of night where you'd read the first, I don't know what, like a minute of your opening of your book, and I invited agents along, and one of the agents couldn't make it, but she asked to see it, and I sent it to her. And there was another agent who I'd found a friend had sent me the details, and I sent her the opening. And the one who was supposed to come to the night but couldn't, she came back and said, oh yeah, you write really well, but I didn't find it very exciting. And I was like, okay, fine. The agent who details have been passed on to me, I sent them the opening. She then asked me for the rest of the book, and I was like, I haven't finished it. But how I found my agent, it was I said part of the course, once you've completed the novel, they put an anthology together of the students' work. So I think it was the first 5,000 words went out in an anthology. And then I had, the result of that, I had 7 agents ask for the full manuscript of the Jigsaw Man. And in addition to that, there were a couple more agents who were recommended to me, and I sent it to them. And the reason why I say agents will wait for your final manuscript was that they got in touch, and I said to them, I just need to work on it for another month or so. And then I'll be ready to send it to you in December. And this would have been end of October and November. And they all said, fine, absolutely fine. So I said, don't feel pressure to, I've got to finish well, I think it's finished, I want to send it off. If they're asking for it and you're not ready, just tell them and they'll wait for you. And then and then it happened really quickly after that, because December 2018, so I think I had probably 10 or 11 agents reading the manuscript. 3 got in touch with me before the new year saying they wanted to see me. I saw 3 agents in January 2019. All 3 of them said they wanted to represent me. And this is the thing no one tells you. Like, all the guidebooks are all about how to get an agent.
Yeah.
There's nothing out there that tells you what to do once an agent says, I want you, or if more than one agent says they want you, because then you have to choose.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and literally I ended up doing like a pro and con list of each agent. And then I looked at the authors they'd published as well. And then also I had meetings with them. So it's who I felt like I gelled with the most and understood my work. And then I ended up signing with my agent probably 2 months after, probably less than that, 2 months after I'd finished the book. And then 2 weeks after I signed with him, then, so I said, no one tells you that your book isn't finished. It's not finished yet. Because then I had agent's notes, which I had to incorporate into the draft. And in that draft, it went off on submission to publishers. And then I went into an auction. And no one tells you what you need to do with your book goes into an auction. I had 6 publishers bidding for it. And then obviously HQ won and HQ, and I signed with HQ publishers. So for me, it was all very, getting an agent and getting published, that whole period was very, very quick. But I said, I've been writing for donkey's years. So it wasn't like I wrote a book and then bang, I got an agent. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for people that are kind of coming at it, because I guess sort of agents did sort of seek you out in that way. People kind of coming at it from the opposite way, sort of, that are sort of seeking out an agent. What would you kind of, if you were sort of looking for an agent now, if you were in that position, what would you kind of suggest prioritizing or looking for, or making sure that you're thinking about when you're starting the process?
I mean, if you've read your manuscript and you thought there's nothing more I can do with this, I'm ready for it to go out on submission. The most important thing is not just to send it to every agent in like the writers and artists, but I say look at the agents, look at their author list, look at who each agent represents. And also as well, you may find sometimes you'd be on Twitter and an agent suddenly says, look, I'm open for submissions. So be open, like follow as many agents as you can, I would say, on Twitter. But the most important thing is always say, do your research, look at the authors they represent. Because there's no point sending your book off to an agent whose author list is just sci-fi or just literary fiction, and they've got no interest in commercial fiction. So that's the most important thing. And then when you are sending off your submission package, and it sounds really admin-like and basic, like I'm telling you how to suck eggs, but again, it's your covering letter, getting that right, getting your synopsis right. And I hate writing a synopsis. I think it's the worst thing in the world to do, but it's easier to do once you've actually got a finished book, because you know your story, so you just a matter of condensing it. And then once you've done that, just submit away. But I'll say it just comes back to making sure you're picking the right agent for you. And if an agent then comes back to you and says, I want to see the rest of the manuscript, and you've got and you get 3 or 4 agents sending you the same thing, then send it to them, but tell them that you have got other agents looking at it also.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a bit of an incentive to them.
Yeah. I'm gonna probably take it back a little bit, just back into your kind of writing process kind of thing. So the setting in the Jigsaw Man is really, really, it's so present. It's almost, I know people say, oh, the setting's almost a character all the time, but the setting is almost a character. How sort of, what, I guess, why did you make it so prominent? And then also how did you approach creating the right setting for your novel?
I think, I remember thinking that when I was writing the book, I wanted to set it, because I live in Southeast London, I'm in Greenwich, and I wanted to set a book there. And another thing was also that of all the crime books I've read that are London based, there's very few of them that were set in Southeast London. They're always either prominently in the city, or like Mark Bingham, they're in Camden, so they're in North London. So I always felt like Southeast London was a bit left out. I mean, we don't need serial killers running around Southeast London, but I just felt we need to be showcased a bit more. And so that was the first thing. And then the second thing was that I grew up by the river. And I said, I grew up hearing all these stories. And when you've grown up somewhere and you've seen a place change, especially with gentrification, you've seen how much a place has changed, you kind of want to you feel a bit protective over the area. So in a sense, I kind of, in the Jigsaw Man, I wanted to show you like the Deptford and Greenwich that I knew, in addition to all the million coffee shops and restaurants that we now got popping out out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So that was the main thing. And also because I think it works in different ways. So obviously I've got the riverbank, I've got the area of Greenwich, but then also, you know, I've been in and out of police stations as a matter of work. So I know what a police station, and even what it smells like, what it's like when they bring in the microwavable, horrible all-day breakfast in for the poor suspects in the cell. And, you know, all those little experiences I know. And I think it's so important, if you're setting a book somewhere, that the location's it's not just a matter of convenience. I feel it has to be involved in some shape or form. So, and even going back to the river, it's like, I know what the river smells like. I know what it's like when the tide is out, and the things that are suddenly materialize because the tide has gone out on the river. So for me, it kind of is, it kind of is probably Deptford and South East London is a bit of a character in itself in the book, but it clearly has a place there. There's clearly a reason for it. I don't know if the Jigsaw Man would have worked so well anywhere else for me.
I mean, for people that kind of maybe aren't setting their book somewhere that they're completely familiar with, and then also, I suppose, people that are writing crime but aren't familiar with sort of the things you mentioned, like what the inside of a police station looks like, all those kind of things. Do you kind of, I know earlier you kind of said you can make things up. What do you kind of think the right sort of balance is to strike when you're between sort of doing your research and making your setting, making it work for your story?
Some things you can make things up, but I said there are certain parts of me, because I only do defense law, I don't know how to prosecute a case. I know how to look for the holes in a prosecution case. So in terms of police procedure, like even little things like there's a scene, I think it might be in book 2, where my characters, Henley and Ramuta, they're going to see a witness, and they park the car outside, and they're parking the car on double yellow lines. And I said, I've got a friend who's a police officer. So I called her up and I was like, what do you put on the dashboard? Do you have like a Metropolitan Police sign so you don't get a ticket? So little things like that. I didn't. She's like, we just put our logbook. So I didn't know. She goes, we put our logbook on the dashboard. That's what they do. So if there's something, you need things like that, you can't make up, because the police officer will email me and say, you got that wrong. So I say, ask questions. So if there's someone you know in the area that you don't have an experience of, ask them questions. Like pathology, I'm not a pathologist, and I've seen crime scene photos, I've seen autopsy photographs, but I haven't been in the room when an autopsy's been taking place. So I got in touch with pathologists and asked her some questions, and she was more than happy to answer the questions. She did offer to send me photographs, and I was like, no, thank you. I don't need to see it. Not today.
Maybe some other
time. Today's not the day to see that. But I think the most important thing, if you are looking to have that strong sense of authenticity and not have people emailing you saying you got the law wrong or you got this part of police procedure wrong. So there's loads of books out there, like how-to guides, and if you're investigating a crime scene, for example, in fiction. And also, so just ask the question. Put it out on, I've done it loads of times, I've just put it out on Twitter. What would happen? Yeah, and someone will respond to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've kind of learned over the last couple of days is that people are just so willing to share their knowledge about kind of
Yeah.
their job, their profession, or we've been speaking to Graham Bartlett, who's a
Yeah.
advisor. And
I emailed him. I found him on Twitter because
there you go.
he was like, ask this person, because it was something, it wasn't procedural related, but he replied back to me, so he got me in touch with someone. So yeah,
nice, reaching out.
Reach out.
Yeah. One thing I did mean to touch on, because I kind of can't believe that Olivier wasn't meant to be a big part of the book. But he's, I mean, people that haven't read the book, he's scary. He's a scary guy. And it's almost like he's kind of one of those villains that can make people like him, but then a switch will flip. And then these go. Yeah. But I guess and if especially as you weren't intending for him to be such a big part, did you kind of go through a bit of a learning curve with writing a villain and creating that kind of tension between characters? And
I did, because with the Jigsaw Man, also we have Henley, so I knew her, and then obviously I grew to know more of her the more I wrote, and also removed her. So they're always part of the cast. And the copycat, the fact I didn't even have a name for him, and I couldn't think of what to call him, like the son of Sam or something. So I just kept him as the copycat. But even because you don't see him, but you just see what he does.
Yeah.
Even then, I didn't have to think about the personality so much. And for me, I said Olivier was just a device. He was someone Henny needed to get information from. So when everyone was asking for more of him, I had to think about, okay, the only thing I knew about him was that he was charming.
Yeah.
And charm's a really hard thing to write, because if someone's describing someone as charming, the person will just say, oh, there's just something about them. They can't really pull it into words. So it was finding a way to highlight his charm, but also highlight his viciousness.
Yeah.
So Olivier took a lot of work, but then once I then was committed to writing him, and he kind of took on a life of his own. And I clearly know what his voice sounds like in my head when I'm speaking to him. And even when I was reading, I think I was reading an excerpt for something else I was doing, and I was reading his part. And I wrote it, and I was like, you're not good at all, you're terrible. But I think that's what you want with a villain. You want the villain to shake your reader up a bit. And it's also, when I was listening to the audiobooks, I was hearing the narrator reading his parts, and I said, I've written this book, I've lost count the amount of times I've read this book, but hearing someone else speak the words, and that's something else I'd recommend to anyone writing. If you can have someone read out your book to you, if like dialogue doesn't sound right, when you hear it from someone else's voice, you can pick up on what works and what doesn't work. But hearing Olivier for the first time, I was like, oh no, you're terrible. It's like you really are. But then he's funny sometimes as well, which kind of like throws people off.
And I think that's what makes him such an effective character, is he's got that none of the characters in that book are just, this is the detective, this is the villain, this is the sidekick, this is the, they've all got that light and shade to them that makes them different.
And it makes them interesting, and I think it keeps you invested if they do have these dark moments and these light moments, if they got flaws, if they're not perfect. Because then, I mean, we as people, we're not perfect. We all make mistakes in like personal life, professional life. We make mistakes, and I don't think it will come across as true if you're reading a detective or any character and they're just perfect in some sense, or that they are just a cliche and they don't move beyond that.
We've got a couple of minutes left, and I think
so quickly.
I know it really has. It's been such a good chat. I've really enjoyed it. But I kind of wanted to finish with just like a couple of slightly broad questions. But what do you love the most about writing, and what do you hate the most about writing? I just think I always love to ask that.
The thing I hate about writing is that no one told me, and no one ever told you, that the manuscripts you finish and you submit to an agent, that it's not over, and that when you get an editor, there'll be more drafts and more drafts and more rewriting and more proofreading and copy editing. No one never tells you that. So I think that's the bit that I don't like, that it's not over until basically it's on the shelf. But the thing I love about writing, I love creating new characters, and I love seeing characters basically come alive on a screen. And when I started writing book 2, so I hadn't written anything for about 4 or 5 months, and when I started writing book 2, I actually said at the beginning, when I wrote the first paragraph of Penny Removed, I was like, oh, hello.
Yeah.
What nice to see you again. And I love that moment. I love that moment of creating something new. And also, because I'm a planner, I do like planning out the story and see what the possibilities could go. But yeah, I don't think I like the surprises when a subplot, and I'm like, oh, literally, I sat at my computer and I was like, you must be joking. Like, why have you done this? Like, I did this.
yeah. Why is this happening to me?
Why is this happening? I put myself there. I made it happen, so now I have to fix it.
Yeah. We did just have quite a good question come in, actually. Who's your own favorite crime author who you've kind of learned the most from, sort of writing wise?
Oh, I did a thing I put it on Twitter yesterday, and it was like my favorite, a selection of my favorite.
Yeah, I thought
yeah. So James Ellroy, and I love American tabloids so much, but it was for the sense that it was such a different style of writing that I had never seen before, and it's such a unique way of storytelling that it made me realize that there's not one form of crime writing. You can do whatever fits with the story that you're going to tell. So I think James Ellroy is definitely someone I learned from. Michael, it's all the top ones, like Michael Connelly and Mark Billingham, Anne Cleves. I really like her style of writing. Yeah, so I think it's just experiencing different ways of telling the story. This is why they say it's important to read as much as you can, and especially read the new, not just for my benefit, but because I got some books like this one. So, but read as much as you can in authors and just see how people explore different ways of storytelling, and also just knowing what voice works for you. Because if you're not a person who naturally can write in the first person, because I can do it, but I find it hard to stay in one person's head for that long. If that's not your natural writing style, then switch to what is. If third person is what you can do, then do that. Don't be forced to emulate. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. And like your voice comes across, like having spoken to you now as well. It's kind of I know that you wrote that book, and I can obviously I do anyway, but it is so strong. Well, it's been so lovely talking to you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And I've seen a couple of people say, oh, I can't wait to read this book now. So we've popped some links in the chat to Nadine's website, her Twitter, her book as well, and also to those ProWritingAid resources for you. And Nadine will be over in the Facebook group to answer your...
I will be over. I'll pop over. But I can just say that someone has said it was Christopher Booker's book I was referring to about the 7 basic plot. And they're absolutely right. That's the book.
That's the book. There you go. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Nadine, again for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.